Good people, what is going on? Another episode of the All Gold Podcast. I'm your host, Desmond. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. Please give me a thumbs up, a like if you are here, and feel free to drop a comment as well. A couple things I want to talk about. First being Bill Belichick is now the head coach at University of North Carolina. Originally, I was actually going to do a video earlier today on my thoughts that I actually thought his offer was in good faith type of deal, like one of those things where, yeah, I'll give you an offer or I'll accept based on these different terms, knowing that you won't meet those terms. But the University of North Carolina said they came to an agreement, so there's been a talk that Bill gave a 400-page Bible or document or binder that of his terms, how he wants to run things, poach this GM, how they want to handle just really all aspects of the operation. So my thought was Bill was doing that to basically just saying, well, I gave it a shot. They just couldn't meet my terms, but it sounds like an agreement has been had. So that is very surprising to me. I just didn't foresee that happening. So for North Carolina, I think you got to go for it. With Matt Brown, he had been there before and came back and I think did a pretty good job, especially early on. And sometimes the time is just not that you're a bad coach or anything like that. It's just sometimes it's just time for a change. And I think that is where North Carolina and Matt Brown came to, was just it's just time to move on. So they're going for it. I can appreciate a administration really just being aggressive, going for it, because that's how good things happen. I mean, with Colorado going after Coach Prime and Dion, I didn't think, number one, I didn't think he should have taken that job because I didn't think Colorado was really serious about football and would give him all the resources that he needs to be successful. And I was completely wrong. He's done a really good job going from they had one win the year before he was there, and now this year 9-3, going to a bowl game. So it's awesome. It's awesome. With Coach Belichick, I want to make sure that I'm not blasphemous, because this is the greatest NFL coach in the history of the NFL, in my opinion. So I want to make sure I'm not blasphemous to Bill Belichick. On the positives, and what I'll say is that if you're a high-level defensive player and you're either in the portal or thought about going into the portal, or a high-level player coming out of high school, I think North Carolina is now going to be on your list, because you have someone who knows what it looks like to be, to be a high-level prospect going to the next level, to the NFL, in a similar way, but almost on the other end of it, kind of similar to Nick Saban in a lot of his tenure at Alabama. Was he knows what it takes to be a high-level prospect and to get drafted highly, whereas Bill Belichick is on the other side of that. Of I'm the one who was picking those high-level players, built a dynasty from it, so on and so forth. So there's definitely going to be, I think, so, like that initial spark of, some great attention and guys just now willing to consider UNC that probably weren't before. The potential drawback on that is the current climate when it comes to NIL is not, it's not as simple as free agency in the NFL. I was watching a show earlier, and they had talked about how Bill is just used to really being a really transactional head coach. Like, oh, you're not very good. Okay, I'll cut you. And just removing the emotion out of it. That Belichick's not an emotional guy and is just used to those types of transactions. And I do agree with that. He is used to that. But I don't think you can operate that way in today's college football. Like, yes, there's going to be times where the end of the season, right? You can encourage guys to get to, go to the transfer portal and, hey, there's not really going to be a spot for you here, next year, so on and so forth. Like there is going to be that aspect of it, but it's just not that cut and dry. And also on the recruiting side of it, and I put that in quotations kind of because I heard something today, and I think it was Albert Breer had mentioned it, but he had said that he asked a question on a show, and I don't know, I can't remember what show it was. I just heard it kind of secondhand, but asked like, how many living rooms do you think that Deion Sanders has sat in this, the 2 years that he's been to Colorado? And, the people were like, oh, probably 100, something like that, so on and so forth. And according to Albert Breer, he said 0 because of just the landscape of where things are today. It's not that type of recruiting climate anymore. It's similar to this, like Zoom and a lot of things are electronic, and then a lot of it is transactional. I mean, the Bryce Underwood recruitment, like that was a really big in public recruitment, and some of it came down to just the final dollar amount. So it's a very different climate, and I wonder how Coach Belichick will operate within that. Because I could imagine someone with his success of just in his mind, the potential annoyance of me like begging this 19, 20-year-old player to come to North Carolina to play football for me. I can imagine that probably would annoy him. And I actually think that's part of the reason why Nick Saban ended up retiring, because it's just different. And I'm fine with the way that it is, but it is different than what Nick Saban is used to. So I could imagine Coach Belichick having those same type of annoyances. And then also too, the thing that I would potentially be concerned about is, let's say, for sake of argument, this just really good or potentially good D tackle transfers from Alabama, let's say, and he's in the transfer portal. Bill Belichick gets on the phone with him. Listen, Desmond, we know how to do things here. We want you to come on down. I'll get you ready for the NFL. X, Y, and Z. Here's what it's going to take, and let's say it's 500,000 that he wants to come down. Cool, 500,000, so on and so forth. There's a difference between just getting that guy into the building and on your campus, and then also that environment that you put them in, because it's just so easy for a guy to pick up and move. And what I mean by that is, I don't think it's any secret that Bill Belichick is a really hard coach. Like he's hard on his team, and he gets great success. So there's no, there's no concern on that. Like it is what it is. But I just wonder how 19, 20, 21-year-old young men are going to handle that when it's so easy for me to pick up and leave. I think one of the things that helped Nick Saban when he was at Alabama is, once you get the guy there, and for majority of his tenure, if a guy wanted to transfer, he had to sit out a full year. So guys, more often than not, guys were willing to just deal with it, kind of go through the process and understand that if I just stick it through, more than likely I'm going to be a, first, second, third round draft pick, and I'm going to make a ton of money, and it's all going to be worth it. Versus, okay, let me transfer to, for sake of our Florida State, but I'll have to sit out a year and then try to get on the field. Guys just weighed that out differently, and they just said, yeah, I'll stick it through with Coach Saban. Like, yeah, he's on my tail all the time, but it'll be worth it. Look at these 15 guys that went, in the first, second round last couple of years. How is that going to be received at North Carolina with Coach Belichick, our guy? Because, like I said, the flip side of it is not that difficult. If you just go to North Carolina and let's say that same D tackle Desmond goes and is there, and Coach Belichick is on me all the time, and he's getting on me about nutrition, and I'm late, and he's kicking me out of stuff, and I, practice is really hard, and he's always yelling at me, always screaming. I don't really like this, man. I'm gonna go out to Cal or whatever. It's just easy to transfer, and now with the transfer portal, it's so much easier to just pick up and go versus having to stick things out. So I wonder what that's going to look like with Coach Belichick. Like I said, I mean, he's had proven success, a lot of that with Tom Brady, but nonetheless, it just kind of is what it is. So I'm curious to see how that will play itself out. Next thing I want to get into is college football playoff format, or I'm sorry, the scheduling, the out of conference scheduling, and what I think that specifically the Power Four conferences should do. So the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, and the ACC. And I think they should almost do it similar to how basketball does the like ACC, Big Ten challenge, so on and so forth. But essentially, it's pretty simple. But I'll use the SEC and the Big Ten for example. But quite simply, it's just at the end of the season or even before the bowls even happen, once the final conference rankings happen, at that point, you will know who at least one of your out of conference teams will be the following season. And I would basically just make it a 1-to-1, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, so on and so forth. So, for example, Texas won the – was it Texas won the SEC? Pretty sure they did. Yeah. No, Georgia won it. This is wrong. But anyway, so Georgia won the I'm losing my mind. Anyway, so I've got the standings up, and they're not quite correct. But anyway, so Georgia won the SEC championship. Yeah, Georgia won it. I'm like literally having a brain fart. So Georgia won the SEC championship. So they would in turn play Oregon, who won the Big Ten championship. So that would be, so this season has ended. So September of 2025, we would have a Georgia versus Oregon matchup in the out of conference. So your first 3 games, so on and so forth. Georgia beat Texas in the SEC championship. So Texas would be the SEC runner-up, and Penn State, who lost to Oregon in the conference championship. Penn State and Texas would now, is September of 2025, play one out of conference game. And what I think that would do is that would just increase the viewership when it comes to, number one, the out of conference games, because those are the matchups that people want to see. Those are the games that get, the crazy numbers along with the rivalry games. But and I think what that would also do is, at least for the Power Four teams, kind of level set things when it comes to the scheduling. You're still going to have your, that's only one of the games, but at least we would know that no matter what, based on the team you were last year, you're going to have a equivalent opponent on your schedule. And there's going to be the weird things, like, for example, Michigan, right, last year was 15-0, undefeated, graduated a lot of guys, and we're just not the same team this year that they were last year. So those things will happen, but I still think that would be fine. It's just college football, but I think it would kind of help with the scheduling of just kind of level setting things, having a bit of a foundation. So now when we get to the end of the season and now we have the strength of schedule argument or whatever the case may be, at least outside of my conference, which usually the conferences Power Four will be pretty solid, but outside of that, even I still have another big time opponent that I can now look at when it comes to, how I performed against them, how that team played, right? So if I'm, Georgia, how did Oregon, perform in the 2025 season? Were they 500 and they weren't really that good of a team? So yeah, I should have beat them by 3 touchdowns, and I did. Or, hey, they were a really good team. They were 11-1, for example, and we beat them by 2 scores. So we should get more of a benefit of the doubt, if you will. So I think that would be a pretty cool process, and just I think that's something that could work. And then basically you would just switch it up every year. So this, for my example, would be SEC and the Big Ten, and then the ACC and the Big 12 would do the exact same thing, and then switch it every couple years or every every other year, every 3 years, whatever the case may be. But I think that's something that could work and would be pretty cool to see. So the last thing I wanted to just quickly touch on, I don't do a ton of NBA. I just honestly, NBA is in a weird spot right now. I do like basketball, but I actually watch more women's basketball, pro and college, than I do NBA. The NBA is just, it's in a weird spot, but I saw a report today that the Miami Heat are listening to trade talks for Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler's agent, not necessarily him, but his agent had mentioned that the Suns is one destination that he'd be open to. And it just, to me, because I always liked Jimmy Butler because he had a real edgy, just kind of demeanor, his playing style, and I liked that about him. And although he did have the time where he was with, was that Minnesota and the Sixers, as far as playing with other superstar players, but he was always a guy that I feel like just said, I don't know exactly how to put it, but just Jimmy was just a dog, and it still is. I don't want to go back on that, but I was a little disappointed to hear that he wants to go to the Suns. I get it. You want to play with teams that are really good and other players that are really good, and you want to try to maximize your shot at winning a championship. Especially, Jimmy's not super young, and he's probably looking and thinking, as far as his basketball mortality, that I wanna get it while I can still contribute. So I do get that aspect of it, but it was a little disappointing that he was looking potentially to join the Suns, and like, man, how many super teams can we have? So that was just a bit disappointing, but anyway, appreciate it. Thank you for listening, tuning in. That is it for me. Peace.